Welcome to the Galen Trombley Show. Be sure to subscribe, review, and share the episode. You can follow me on social media at Galen Trombley. I hope you enjoy the show.
Greetings. Please hold for a very important message. Light speed sequence initiated. How may I help you?
Bonjour.
Security breach.
The truth shall set you free. Awesome. It's a miracle.
Stabilize. 3, 2, 1. Mission complete.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Welcome, everybody. It's episode 247 of the Galen Trombley Show. My guest today, David Champagne. He is the president, CEO of TDC. You just go by TDC now, right?
Yeah, TDC used to be the Development Corporation, but we've changed it.
Okay, so I didn't know if you still went by that, but yeah, the Development Corporation, TDC. I was telling David before we went live, there's a lot of stuff on here. He filled out a lot of good information, so I told him we probably will just go right through his list because almost everything on here, I'm like, I actually am curious about that or want some insight. I also selfishly want to pick your brain on a couple of these things that I've had to dive more into recently, and I'm like, you know what? Someone that's been doing it for more than a couple years will have a lot better insight, so I might selfishly, get some nuggets from you. So, David, for people that do not know you, can you give us a little background, who you are, how'd you get to the great area of the North Country?
Yeah, so like I said, my thing, I'm not a native New Plattsburgh, but Plattsburghian, I guess is how you'd say it. Although my parents are, and so my parents moved away for a job. My dad was a repo man in the Utica area in his early days. Okay. So I'm working insurance for an insurance outfit in that region. So they moved there outside Utica. I was born there, and I'm not sure what age, but I think around age of 3, we moved back to Plattsburgh. So I kind of consider myself a native. People that know me are always surprised to hear I wasn't born in Plattsburgh. Okay. Because most people think I was. So I've lived here most of my life. We came back. We moved to West Plattsburgh until about 6th grade, and then moved to the city and the big city, and went to a PHS. Come from a very large family, 7 kids, good Irish Catholic family. Champagne doesn't sound Irish, but my mother's main name's Kehoe, which might ring a bell to the SUNY Plattsburgh people.
Yeah. But same family?
Same family, okay. Yeah. So we have a lot of connection there. So moved back. I'm one of 7, 3 boys, 4 girls, oldest boy. Very involved in sports and stuff, all our family throughout my youth and beyond. I'm one of 2 that still remain here. I have a brother that teaches at PHS in high school. Everyone else has pretty much moved away. Went to college, started at Potsdam State for a couple of years, then moved back to Plattsburgh because I wanted to run. Okay. If you know my family, you know we're runners. So I came back to Plattsburgh to run because I wanted to give it a shot. I didn't run in high school, but I wanted to give it a shot. And of course, when I came back, Potsdam started a program that year that I left. So anyways, I came back here.
So you had to run against them.
I had to run against them.
Yeah.
And so I came back, went to SUNY Plattsburgh, got a degree in political science, which is, if you know my full background, you find that's pretty interestingly strange, since I worked in pharmaceuticals for 34 years. But partway through my college degree, halfway through my junior year, I decided I wanted to do something different. I always thought I wanted to be a politician. I always wanted to be a U.S. Senator. I kind of changed my mind there. I actually worked for Stafford in Albany one summer, which was really interesting. Now I got that job. It's an interesting story too, but made a decision I didn't want to do that. I wanted to go into exercise physiology, so I took heavy sciences, and did that for a while, and I ended up graduating with a minor in biology. And actually through running, I hooked up with a guy that worked as a supervisor at Aris Laboratories at the time in Rouse's Point, and he got me an interview. And the day before I graduated, I ended up graduating in December because I just got sick of college and said I need to get out, because I went going 5.5 years to do more of the sciences. So started working at Aris Laboratories on the 20th of January after I graduated. They offered me the job the day before I graduated. So Go ahead.
No, that's great. So, so when you went, I always like seeing the backstory of people because I think if you stretch it back and go from like where you started to where you end up, I think a lot of people, in your position, obviously you carry a title like president or CEO in a very important organization locally for us and regionally, and then you kind of go all the way back and kind of like what's your first job, how'd you start, and it sounds like going into college, you're probably like every 18-year-old and didn't really know what you wanted to do.
I had no idea. I always admire young adults that come out and you can tell by their junior in high school they know what they want to be. They want to be an engineer. They want to be a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be an astronaut. Whatever it might be. That was not me.
So when you kind of bounced around, because I think you mentioned 3 different political science, biology, or physiology, or exercise science.
Physiology. Yeah.
So there was really not a connection on any of those besides biology and the exercise science, just a little bit of science. But like when you go, so like the political science, political science is, it's science in the sense of like, I guess it's the science of politics, but it's not really like, our science you would learn in science class.
Right.
So there's really not a huge connection there, or did you find there was a lot of overlap?
No, there's no connection whatsoever.
Okay, I didn't think so. I just was like, maybe there is. I didn't.
For some crazy reason, even when I was majoring in political science, I took science courses as electives because I always kind of had a little bit of an interest in them.
Are you still a science guy?
Am I a science guy now? Yeah, I'm more of a curious guy. I like to explore different things. And so my science, I'm not, that's not, if you talk to the people who work with me in Associated Pharmacy School, and I wasn't a heavy science. What I've learned in life is find people who have strengths that you don't have and put them around you. Yeah. And so I would do that. So I'm a science guy. I wouldn't say I was definitely a science guy.
You knew the people that weren't science people.
Yeah. So when I got done college, before I graduated, my wife and I, who was also into running all this stuff, we were both offered a graduate internship at Ithaca through the coach who was actually coaching at SUNY Plattsburgh at the time, and I was being his assistant. Long story short again, because I blew out my knee running, and so I couldn't run anymore. So he said, "Why don't you coach with me?" So I did. Got to know him real well. A guy named Jim Nichols, great guy, and he tried to.
He was from Plattsburgh area?
Yeah, I don't know if he was originally from Plattsburgh. I think he came up here just to coach.
Jim Nichols. He was at Plattsburgh coaching you?
He didn't coach me because I hurt my knee, so I could not run. A guy named Dick Fisher coached me in college.
Because I just had a couple weeks ago, I had on, or maybe a month ago now, Brett Wilmot.
Yeah, no,
and
Brett.
He might have said that name. It rings a bell. That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, he would know Jim. And
it's probably okay.
Yeah, Jim's a lot older than Brett, but they traveled the same.
He was his coach.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So that might make the
he probably was his coach.
Okay, that's what I think it was. I'm trying to go back to the.
Yeah, he probably was his coach. He was a great guy, but he tried to recruit my wife and I to go to Ithaca, set us up with a full ride for exercise physiology masters and help him coach.
That's a good school for that too, right?
Yeah, it's a great school for it. But I had a job offer and I took it, and I almost didn't take it. I'm glad I did now. It all turned out pretty well, but I almost didn't take it.
Did your wife go down to it?
No, neither of us went.
Okay.
So,
so when you ended up getting, I guess when you started out, and obviously Wyeth, you started because you basically said right out of college, frontline supervisor, and kind of rose through the ranks there.
Yeah.
Does that sound about right?
Yeah. So I started like most people start in pharmaceuticals, unless you have previous experience. You start either on the floor or as a supervisor. And I started as a line supervisor in packaging. Did that for a couple of years, and what you end up doing is just getting more experience, knowledge, and you branch out and do more and more. Mm-hmm. Eventually, I worked my way up to running the Rouse's Point site, and then Pfizer bought Wyeth, and I made strong connections with the president of the division and his first right-hand person, and they eventually gave me sites as far away as Sydney, Australia, Amboise, France, West California, Florida, Tennessee, so different places, Puerto Rico, all over the world. And the good news is it was a great experience doing that. The bad news is those sites were all slated for closure. So they saw that I was able to handle this closure here very well, and they wanted to use that skill set.
Okay.
So I wasn't the one that decided they closed, but I was the one that went in and worked with them and oversaw the site through their closure process.
So when you got pulled overseas to go do that, how long were you gone typically at a time? Like when you went to, like I said, Australia or Europe? Talking like months, talking weeks, days?
Weeks, yeah. It's usually minimum a week to 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And were you going and like auditing what they were doing and trying to just kind of give direction as to where it should go?
So I was basically what they would call vice president of operations. Is how I waved out. So it's kind of interesting when you look at it. I didn't get the title because if I took the title, I would lose the package basically from Rouse's Point, and so I didn't want to do that. I knew I didn't want to leave. I wanted to retire out from here. So I got the level and everything goes along with it, but not the title. So my title remained what's called managing director, but I was given a vice president role over these sites. So when you have that role over a site, at least in Pfizer, what you do is you have operational control, and twice a year you got to be at those sites to go through operational reviews with them. So everything from soup to nuts that you would think what happens in that plant is reviewed with the vice president of operations over the site. And then on an ongoing weekly, monthly basis, I'd have calls with the site leader for going over what's happening and just supervising that portion of it.
So when you, I'll probably come back to stuff. I want to piggyback off that. So when you talk about, because I have a lot of questions on like organization, and I think you put topics you consider yourself knowledgeable on. So, I mean, there's a whole list here, like pharmaceutical manufacturing, but like operational excellence, organizational design, leadership.
Yeah.
So when you go to a business like that, like what are the things that you look at? And I was saying before, like this is stuff that I'm really kind of auditing with just even in our small company of like little there's inefficiencies or things that could be more streamlined or things that can potentially alleviate maybe downstream problems that we just kind of, as you get like you'll get a bottleneck down because of 3 steps before that can be simplified. So how do you look at everything, I guess initially, and then as you do a deeper dive in, like how does it start to develop? And this was all the same company, same manufacturing, right? It was Pfizer all the way through.
Yeah.
So things were pretty much, there was a lot of like similarities between all of them.
Yes and no. So there's definitely similarities, but if you understand Pfizer, the way Pfizer grows is by purchasing other companies. Okay. And so every time you do that, you're integrating another company into the Pfizer model, I'll call it. And every company has their own culture and own way of doing things. So as you get assimilated, as the Borg would say if you follow Star Trek, as you get assimilated, you have to take on these systems, ERP, MRP type systems, and the way of doing things that Pfizer does it. So when you go on a site, there's always a little bit of differences. It's never completely the same, and especially depending on how long they've been in the organization.
So you would typically have like this is a perfect world, and then how do we kind of try to mold them the best we can, but have like a little bit, like I said, flexibility.
Yeah.
So when you go in, like, what's the first things you look at? Maybe your first day there to, hey, now we got this thing kind of cooking, like, and then we're making maybe a little bit smaller details or smaller shifts.
Yeah. So, I mean, every business is different. The business I know is pharmaceuticals. So if I walk in a site, the first thing I'm doing is touring around and taking a look at the cleanliness, how's the place maintained, how's it kept, looking at the number of people. You can walk down a hall. Remember, these are large facilities. You can walk down a hallway. And is there 10 people walking in a hallway just milling around, or is there 100? And okay, if there's 100, why are there 100 people walking around? So you start to question, head count. You can look at that, cleanliness, attention to detail. So it's really a broad scope, broad brush type look when you first walk in the facility and get a lay of the land. And then, the next thing you do is you go in and you start looking at the books. So, depending on what the business is, you're looking at obviously the financials, you're looking at the quality books, you're looking at the production rates, you're looking at the efficiencies that they're running. So you're just taking really a full look at everything about it, the staffing levels, and are they meeting budgets? So every site and like any business, you're setting a budget. And if you look at a budget, to me, a budget's a snapshot in time. It's not fixed. It's something that you created at one point, and then you look at a forecast. So when you're running a business, you start with a budget at the beginning of the year, assuming your year is a calendar year. And then every month you take a look at that again and say, okay, this is our budget. here's where we're at, what we're forecasting for the rest of the year. And so you're always adjusting to that forecast. And so you get what you call your latest estimate on the forecast. And you make decisions, value decisions on, okay, do we want to spend that money? Do we want to go down that path? Or do we say, no, we need to make changes so we stay within the original budget? So I'll be looking at that kind of stuff when I walk into a site.
Okay. And are you the one that has like decision making on that, or any kind of you kind of give them direction on where to go, or does that get handed off to someone else?
It depends. I mean, once again, it depends what kind of business you're in. I mean, ultimately, in the role I was in, I was the one that was accountable. So, if you ever deal with a RACI, you know what a RACI is?
No, I don't.
So a RACI is a format you can use to decide who's doing what. So RACI basically stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, informed, right? So everyone in an operation can play a role in those areas. So someone's responsible for making it happen. Someone's accountable if it doesn't happen. Those aren't always the same people. They can be totally different people. And then someone you would consult and someone you'd inform. So when you're over an operation, ultimately you're accountable. But at some point, some aspects of the job, you can be someone who's consulted for guidance or just informed after the fact. So depends on what's happening. I mean, when you deal with something like pharmaceuticals, you're dealing with people's lives. So it's very important that we do things right. So some things I would be consulted before, and some things I would be informed after. Some things I would be like, what do you want to do? Asked.
So how many times you walk in and maybe, because I'm assuming you're looking for, I won't say inefficiencies, but just things that aren't up to standard. Like I would say most stuff is kind of like we're humans. Like if things are good, we're like, okay, it's good, but I'm going to try to focus on the bad. At least that's how my brain works. I'm sure that's how you were looking. Like, okay, great, awesome. Where's the problems? When you go in, how often did you walk right in and be like, okay, I know exactly what the problem is? Or how much did you walk in and say, well, I got to really dig, like really kind of go deeper into stuff and kind of think, I guess, like, what was the level of what you were seeing or what you were finding on like a typical site visit?
Well, I mean, so in that instance, I'm getting monthly reports already, so I'm not walking in there blind.
Okay.
So there's KPIs, metrics that are put out every month and every business should be doing that. You should be looking at what your KPIs are, and so there should be a path. There should be visibility where things are working well, where things aren't working well. So what expectation would be is if you're over a business, when you walk in, if something's not going well, that the person actually running that part of the business should be prepared to say, yeah, we're not hitting it here. We're supposed to be putting out 10 bottles an hour and we're putting out 5. Here's why, and here's what we're doing to try to correct that. And so the expectation would be if I walk in, you're prepared to tell me why you're not hitting those. So some things are very much in the forefront. You know it coming in. Some things you discover through conversations.
How, and again, maybe at the level that you were at, it was probably not as much, but when you walked in, how much thinking did you have to do versus how much did you just have to tweak what they did? And the reason I say that is one of my pet peeves. I know you got to like deal with it, but sometimes you want someone or a department or a group of people to do stuff, and it's like, well, what should we do? Looking for direction. So then they put the thinking on you, meaning like I got to think through this problem and tell them basically how to do what they're doing. And there's a level of that, and there's also a level where I'm like just think a little bit, like just take a second, like plan it out versus just saying like, what do you want us to do? I've always tried to be one that I try to think through through a problem, and I try to have a solution. So if I'm talking to someone, at least I have the background knowledge, so we're not wasting time. Did you find that most stuff was given to you with very good thought, so then you could have good conversations, or was it like you rolled up and like, oh, you gave me numbers, but you have no like nothing really to back it up, or you haven't like thought through the kind of the presentation to you? That happen often, or were they pretty prepared?
No, they're prepared. I mean, we were talking about very smart people.
Yeah.
You get into these operations, you get to the levels you're at, you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And if you're surprised by something, unless it's once in a while is okay, but if it's happening all the time, you're not in that role. So when you go into any kind of operation, there's a leadership team that's put together that handles all the different aspects. So you would have a finance lead, you'd have a quality lead, a production lead, all the different areas, and so they're SME subject matter experts in those areas. So you should not be able to school them too hard on their area of business. If you can, they're in the wrong job, and so they're well aware, prepared. Highly functioning individuals on what they're overseeing. So it can be it's more guidance, the way, I guess my philosophy of management is I'm here to help you. I'm here to help facilitate, get you what you need, to provide the tools. So they'd be more of that. And that's kind of how I manage.
Was there anything like compliance-wise where it's like, even though you guys are doing this, we really want you, because from the higher ups, they really want this done, and you're slightly off of that. Did you have any of that, or was it most of it pretty much in line?
It's most in line, but you got to remember with pharmaceuticals and the FDA, the bar is always being raised.
Yeah.
So we're always being challenged to do it better, find new innovative ways, and so a lot of times we'll be bringing to the conversation discussions around, okay, here's something we want to try to improve on. You're doing it okay now, but we want to try to raise the bar. So we'd be trying to innovate what we're doing, and that company is very good at that.
So you left, you said, in 2018, right? So did you technically retire, or was that?
Yeah. I'm laughing. Yeah. So I did retire.
So you're in a retirement gig right now.
Yeah, I'm in a retirement gig. I was, to go back to my initial start, when we first started talking, I was on the board at TDC from 2008. And when Paul Grasso, my predecessor, decided to retire.
Yeah, he was a great guy.
Yeah, he was a great guy. And he decided to retire. I actually started heading up the search committee with the personnel group for the replacement. And, long story short, we were not finding the person we wanted. And so I was kind of approached, would you be willing to do this? And I originally said no for like 2 months. And I finally said, let me think about it. Maybe I'll throw my hat in the ring. But I intended on retiring. I was on what's called a 90-day warrant period, where you're paid out for 3 months.
Okay.
The company has to pay you because of jobs going overseas. And so I was doing that, and my full intent was to retire and maybe consult a little. And I said, all right. So I threw my name in the hat and went through the interview process like I should have, and everyone else did. And they offered me the job, and I said, okay, I'll do it for like 3 years. And so that was 5 years ago.
I was going to say, so within a couple of years buffer.
Yeah.
So are you someone that? So actually, first off, do you watch The Office at all?
Nah, I've watched a little bit of it.
Okay, I won't judge you too hard then. It's my favorite show.
My kids love that show.
When they did the search committee, and like basically, one of the characters, Dwight in the show,
I know who Dwight
puts
is.
himself up for the job.
Yeah,
so if you pull a Dwight, like nobody else is good, but I'll put myself up.
I did not pull a Dwight. If you talk to the people involved, I did not throw my name out there. And
so are you someone that you said before you were curious? Are you someone that likes to be challenged? Are you someone that, or just flat out just needs something to do and gets bored? Like would you have done retirement well? Or?
No. And I'm going to retire again, and hopefully, and I'm very worried about that too. I need to be stimulated. I'm very creative. It's one of my strengths. I'm a solutions type person. I love thinking through problems and coming up with solutions and creative ways to solve things and rethink things. It's one of the reasons Pfizer used me as for organizational design quite a bit around the different sites where I had sites that reported to me. I'd be sent to other sites too if their leadership teams weren't operating right, and look at how they operated and help them kind of figure out how to operate better.
What are you like? What's some stuff that is that you're curious about right now? I mean, maybe in life, but like even like right now, what's on your radar?
Yeah. Politics, like everybody else, I think where the country's going and all the divisions, how you try to fix that. I follow that quite a bit.
So that's never left you then?
No,
From a young age, right? Political science still in there?
I guess it's never left me.
Yeah.
But I find that very interesting. I like to read about history. Very curious about that. I'm getting into, my wife's going to laugh, she hears this, into landscaping.
Okay.
And,
Little green thumb.
Yeah. And looking at how to lay things out and, how to have flowers and different shrubs come in different parts of the, so I'm trying to explore that a little bit.
So it always kind of looks full?
Yeah, it kind of looks full. It's, it flows. Cooking, I love to cook. I wouldn't say I'm a great cook, but I'm trying to explore that some. So if you get the theme, I'm trying to figure out things I can do once I retire. So those are kind of some of the things that I'm getting curious about. And
are you someone that let's take landscaping. You learn how to landscape. Are you someone that goes all in and gets very obsessive over something?
No.
Okay.
No.
Like, do you know what I'm? Do you like? Yeah. Okay, because I know some people that like all of us. I have a really good friend of mine. He's been in like multiple, at a fairly high level. Like goes like he was in the bees at one point. He was in the guitar. He was in but it would go like so hard in that for probably a year, and then would kind of phase out of it. Yeah. But it was almost like he needed like the chase of trying to understand something.
Yeah. I like to be involved in a lot of things.
Okay.
So I mean, with the job I'm doing now, I do a lot with Plattsburgh. I do some with Clinton County. I do a lot of things in New York State. I like to get involved in a lot of different aspects. Outside of work, I've been known as a runner most of my life, but I ride road bikes, mountain bikes, I ski, I play golf. And I try to get involved in different things and not just stay focused on one thing. And
so you're like, I mean, you're an outdoors guy then. We could say
I love the outdoors.
Okay.
Yeah, my dad gave me the love of outdoors.
So like right now, if you said on a perfect day, weekend or day off or something like that, like you're probably outside somewhere.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where do you ski mostly?
Whiteface.
I saw snow the other day.
Yeah.
I go skiing up there, not as much as I'd like, but I saw snow up there, so I was like, So I haven't played much golf this year as much as I'd like, so I'm kind of like burned off that quick, and then I'm looking forward to ski season.
Yeah. This wasn't a good summer for golf, anyways.
No,
it was kind of wet.
Well, I hurt myself a little bit, and then the water. So I was like, you know what, it's fine. I got a bunch of passes for next year. It'll work out good.
Yeah.
So now, when you go back to like something like TDC and you get into that, what was the transition like? Because I mean, you were on the board, so you knew. I mean, you kind of knew what you're getting into, but easy transition, difficult. How much was the similarity between Pfizer and?
Well, the jobs are anywhere near similar.
Okay.
Completely different. I wouldn't say the transition was hard, but it was definitely a transition. I used to say I live local, work global.
Okay.
I mean, it's interesting because most of the people that know me that aren't my really close-knit friends had no idea what I did for a living. If you ask my kids,
ever?
Yeah, ever.
Okay.
And if you ask my kids what I did for a living, they couldn't describe to you what I did.
Yeah.
Because I never brought work home. It's just not what I did. But most of the people don't understand what I used to do. How big of a job it was, the scope I had, what I did. So, so it was very much a global job. I interacted with the governor of New York State several times, Schumer, all these different people, and different countries, around the world, different things. It was a very global job. I was with the CEO of Pfizer many times, that type of stuff. So it was a very big global job. The job I'm in now, I kind of look at it as a regional, at the most, a state level job.
Yeah.
So it's a whole different group of people and group of problems and opportunities, right? So that was a real pivot for me for being on the road a lot, traveling. I was in Manhattan every other week, Pfizer headquarters. So I was traveling quite a bit, especially in the last 10 years of my career. So now to be basically here all the time in a smaller office there's 7 of us compared to
hundreds,
thousands.
Or thousands, okay.
Used to have thousands. So it was a whole different scale. But, I'd worked, I'd been on the board, so I knew the organization well. I knew the mission. Mm-hmm. I knew the staff. I think I slipped into it pretty seamlessly. Was it a difficult adjustment? Not really, but it definitely was an adjustment to do it.
Do you prefer did you have a preference for either one, or are they both, you kind of like them for what they are?
Yeah, I like them for what they are. I mean, I love my life with Pfizer and Wyeth. It was very exciting. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was always a challenge, always something new going on, meeting interesting people, going around, seeing different cultures, being exposed to the diverse landscapes, and it's just it was a great experience. At the same time, I kind of look at I'm giving back now to the community with the experience I have working with different individuals. One of the things I really like doing is mentoring people and helping young people grow and get different experiences. And so I'm trying to do that with what I'm doing now.
How much of like you said, overseas, different cultures, larger scale, how much of that have you translates into what you do now? Like, is it either directly or it's kind of, I mean, obviously you're there's no way you're going to escape those experiences. They've molded you to who you are now, but how much do you tap into stuff or remember like, hey, I remember they did this in Australia, and I think we could do that here, or whatever. Maybe stuff you saw down at like corporate in New York City.
Yeah, I use that all the time.
Okay.
So, when I look at, say, Clinton County, there's especially the town of Plattsburgh, city of Plattsburgh, this region, Peru, Saranac, this tight region here. There are so many people doing really great things, and they're sometimes they're just in separate pathways. And you don't always see the linkage where they're coming together. And I kind of see it kind of like an organization, like a company where you have, so if you work for a company like Pfizer or Wyeth or any of these big companies, I'm sure, you have global operations meetings where you bring all the different sites together and the different support networks together a couple times a year, and you do best practices and look at and get the SMEs come and speak and try to share information. I kind of see that there's opportunity for that in the North Country, in Clinton County, to bring things together and try to make it so you're actually all working on the same thing and not doing duplication of effort. So I try to use the experience of that to try to help do this.
Who's outside of like the TDC or the 7 people in the TDC, like what are the other organizations that you find you work the most with or most hands-on with?
Yeah, so I'd say in the last couple of years, obviously the Chamber of Commerce with Gary and his staff, Mike Zerlo in the county I work quite a bit with, Mike Cashman in the town. Mm-hmm. I'm very involved with the North Country Regional Economic Development Council with ESD, probably them more than anybody right now. Those are the groups. With really trying to work hard with Clinton Community College, CV Tech for workforce type stuff in education. So, kind of a broad group between mix of public and sectors. Private, it's more with our tenants, making sure that we get them what they need. One of the things we try to do in our park, TDC's park, is build a sense of community. Mm-hmm. So we do a lot of different things with our marketing and branding and with our tenants to try to bring them together and show them that, like I was saying before, there's resources there that they can co-use too, and they can learn from each other and support each other. I
had Mike was on Cashman a couple weeks ago, and he was kind of, obviously, like celebrating the amount of new infrastructure, the amount of whether it's the amount of square footage of businesses or the amount of building permits or all these things that were coming up, that he said based on the numbers were like on the rise and kind of really good metrics that they're trying to track. And I'm sure that you guys could look at the same stuff. If you were to look back, like let's go back to 2008 and then let's go 2018. So get on the board, become, president CEO. How different is it from 2008 to now and then from 2018 to now? Because what I was telling with Mike, and I was actually saying this to Billy too, Billy Jones was on the week prior to him. So, and I know there's a lot of overlap, but what they were saying was, and I asked both of them and kind of asking you, like, most good things take time. And if you were to think that most people kind of want things done now, but if you were to stretch that back, I mean, you're only going back 15 years, 2008. If you were to stretch that back in that time frame, if looking back, are you at a spot where it's like, wow, we've accomplished so much, or is it at a spot where you're like, I wish we would have done more, or is it at a spot where it's like, you still think you're behind for some reason? Because I think most people, myself included, and a lot of people don't like stop and smell the roses or stop and like look behind and like, wow, I've like walked that entire distance. Like we always just think like, what's the next problem? What's the next goal? What's the next thing? We're caught up in this like day to day or the future more than we are like present and past.
Yeah.
Are you able to like ever evaluate kind of the past or be like, wow, we've done a lot? even though it might not seem like you're more focused on the next 5 years than you were the last 15. But
Yeah.
a lot has happened, though.
Yeah, I mean, TDC as an organization's evolved enormously since 2008. I mean, if you go back to 2008, we were running the IDA too. So the Clinton County IDA. So we've separated that out. And now the county runs that by himself, but they were contracting to us to run that. So my role would have been the chair of the IDA too. So that's separated out. And that's, in some ways good and bad. It definitely brings different changes. We have put up a lot of new buildings. We have gone to more, so I call it some key manufacturing facilities versus just distribution, pick and pack, and warehousing.
Yep.
When I came on board into this role, we were probably at, I want to say 70% occupied with mostly pick and pack warehousing. At that time, they just completed the Vaporstone facility on the old airbase, which is a public joint venture.
Is that part of your?
Yep.
Okay.
So that's a really good. When I think about our facilities and our operation, I kind of look at like a mall. We have anchor businesses, and so Vaporstone is a really good anchor building for us. Has a really good, strong business there, not just warehousing. So since that to me was kind of the kickoff of that. Since then, we have created. Now we're putting up a building number 25, where Medisca's going.
Is that Tom Miller Road?
Yep.
Yeah.
So Medisca's going in there, and that's going to be basically a pharmaceutical site with laboratories and manufacturing and warehousing and locker rooms and the whole gambit of pharmaceuticals. And so that to me, it's another anchor store type thing. And we're in the process of talking to another potential business right now, doing something very similar, not pharma, but creating another manufacturing area, which will give us like 3 big anchors. I guess those are separate from, if I went back, everything was transportation. And transportation's a big thing around here for business. But we like to think about not being one-dimensional.
Yeah.
Well,
I was going to say, so like where your building is now, so you have like Norrisk, you have Monahan, and you have like, when you start going back along there, are those all considered part of TDC? Or are those different? Like when you talk about anchors, you're talking about tenants, not necessarily
I'm talking about tenants. Yep. Yeah. So if you talk about anchors in the community, those are great examples. So when you have Monahan, which is a fantastic business, a great organization that continues to grow.
Beautiful building too. I mean, it's
beautiful building. I was with their lead a couple weeks ago. So when you look at, if you look at Clinton County as a whole, if you want to talk Clinton County, I mean, we look at Schluter, Monahan, Medisca, Nova, unfortunately, is going out, and then Alstom, Bombardier. We have some really good anchor businesses, which I think from a community, if you go back to 2008 or even back to where the air base is here, we're better off with these size businesses in this community. So if one leaves, and like Nova's leaving now, if you're working at Nova, it's very dramatic to you as an individual, as an employee. But Nova going will not take down this community, right? I mean, there are enough jobs that if employees are exiting from Nova and want to work, there are jobs here, and good jobs. So versus Pfizer has thousands of jobs, and they leaves a huge hole. So I think if you look back to 2008 or even 2018, as a community, we're in better shape than we were then.
And I'm just going, I think even since 2018, I'm just, again, I'm going just the road you guys are on, and just kind of looking at what has popped up. I mean, I remember touring Nova Bus in college, which I think was probably around 2010, 2011. So I went for supply chain management. I was kind of the same as you, never used it, but we got to go tour the plant, and I think it was when they first opened, and that was really cool, seeing it. But at the time, that was like a big deal, and there wasn't a whole. I mean, there was Bombardier was around, and a couple of the spots, but it's really grown, and that's what I'm saying. In the last 15 years, the Plattsburgh area is way different than I remember it. Yeah. And that's why I was telling Mike and Billy and that it's like, what's the next 15 years going to look like? Which is probably going to be, I would say, sped up in the amount of growth, meaning that exponentially. I think just the area is kind of in a good. And I feel like a lot of people would say this too. I think the leadership locally in a bunch of different places, I think are all and again, I'm not in it with you guys or sitting around talking about it, but I feel like from an outsider perspective, I feel like a lot of people are rowing in the same direction, and I feel like
absolutely,
yeah, I think there's a lot of cohesiveness as to okay, this is what we want to do, and okay, it's almost like you said, it's like a massive organization. Yeah. Everybody's got you're the head of TDC, but I feel like everybody's on the same page, and at the state level, government level, and then obviously just locally running the businesses and people at the state level, and I think that what we're going to see over the next, what might have taken us 15 years could take us 7 years, or could take, we're going to start seeing a much more drastic build, and that's why I'm always, and of course I look at it more from the. We're the, you guys are lead metrics are kind of we're with the lead and lag metrics. So we're lagging leading homes. Yeah. So when I look at that for real estate, it's when I start telling people what I'm seeing, I'm going off of just trends, trying to stay on top of what you guys are doing and other people are doing and kind of what we're seeing. Cause you bring in big plants, there's jobs, there's opportunity, there's obviously better, an economic situation locally, which hopefully eventually I hope is going to translate to people wanting to develop, more housing here for sale, which is obviously a big,
we need it.
We need it, yeah, and that's something that if it's kind of if you build it, they will come. There's no doubt in my mind if someone was to come put money into subdivisions or housing or townhouses or whatever that they wouldn't be snatched up. The problem is it's then you're looking at all the stuff they have to look at, margins and everything else, but eventually that will happen. So it's when you start looking at all the stuff that's happening that would cause that, this stuff is happening, which eventually it's a matter of time.
Yeah.
But I think that could happen sooner. 5-10 years from now, I think we could be seeing some of that stuff popping up. Oh,
absolutely. And obviously the different services that are required if jobs are here, obviously people need daycare, housing.
Yep. And daycare is a tough one.
Transportation.
Right now.
Yeah, it's all tough. And I agree with you. The rate of change has sped up. So in the last since 2019, now we're in our second 60,000 square foot building. And this is the second building that we're putting up that within 3 months we had a lease. Wow. 3 months of starting construction. So steel's not in the ground yet. We're doing the foundation, land clearing, and we were in serious conversation that the building, Madiska wanted that building.
Now,
25.
Now Madiska's currently on Route 3?
Yep, Madiska's currently has 2 buildings on Route 3. They lease space from 2 of ours and they own one.
So is it normal for you guys to build a building to then try to attract people? Or is it how does that work? It's kind of like chicken and the egg. Which one kind of comes first in that relationship?
Yeah, that's what makes TDC unique. You're in real estate, and what it costs to do a building today. It's you're in residential, we're more in industrial, but the cost to do a building is prohibitive for what you're going to get for a lease rate. Mm-hmm. So you can't build a building today and then cover it with a lease.
Yeah.
So most companies, most builders are not going to put up a 60,000 square foot industrial building on spec.
Yeah.
Because first off, they're not sure if they're going to be able to lease it. Secondly, they aren't going to get a lease rate that's going to cover the cost of the build. Yep. So they're not going to do it. So because we're not for profit, our goal, we're not trying to make money. We're trying to create jobs. Mm-hmm. Our whole mission is about bringing jobs to the North Country and trying to elevate the quality of those jobs. So we uniquely will put a building up like we've done on spec, understanding that we are going to basically cover some of the cost of that build for a certain period of time before we kind of broke even and the building's paid for. So most places won't do that. I won't name any names, but if you go and ask certain individuals that will you put a building up, they're going to look at it and say, not unless I have a tenant and I know I'm going to get a return on my investment, right? It only makes sense. But we do it. And we've since 2018, I guess, we've put up 3 buildings. So the Vaporstone building, 80,000 square feet, the 260s that we've done now, the building 23 and then building 25, which we're doing right now.
Which one's building 23?
23 is right next to our office. So it's on it's 109 Industrial Boulevard.
Okay.
So it's another 23,000.
Who's house in that one right now?
It varies, but Michelin's going in there right now. Basically.
Okay.
Yep. And the way we do buildings, try to make it easier and more successful for us and for businesses, is if we build a 60,000 square foot building, we make it so it can be divided into 320s.
Okay.
So we have a division, a wall that has a overhead door you can open and go through, unless someone gets involved with us early on and says, I don't want that wall there.
Because that was what Mediska did, right?
That's what Mediska
Yeah.
did. So we had the plans all mapped out, and they came in and said, no, we want the building, but we don't want those there. So what we do is we'll put all the subsurface infrastructure in, so we have to go back and redo it. So we have all the footers in place and everything. If Mediska left at the end of their lease, we could put the walls back in.
Yeah. Okay. That's
Yeah.
how often is do you have a lot of turnover amongst tenants, or are they pretty much like you have because I feel like most of the tenants, besides obviously like a Nova leaving, but I mean, and they've been there for 15 years, so it's like it's not like these are short term. Like, what do you try to do? Mostly like 5-10 year terms, 20-year terms. Like,
yeah, we would love 5-10 year terms, and we have that with some, but it's usually 3 years.
3, okay.
3 to 5 years. We do have some 10s and 5s, and we have one longer than that. But yeah, ideally we'd like 5 to 10 years. But usually 3 years is our low mark that we try to shoot for. Okay. If you get below that, things change, and we want more flexibility.
I was gonna say, what do you think the biggest kind of, when you look at opportunity, but like kind of, the SWOT idea, like, SWOT analysis, like if you're looking at both of those, like what's the thing that you think is, here's our strength, and this is probably our, biggest, maybe weakness or biggest thing that we're trying to overcome or trying to figure out? Yeah.
Yeah. Go back to your first question. I'll answer that one there. But your first one was, do we have our businesses new or growing? Most of the businesses in our park, our tenants have been there and are growing. So they come in and they become more and more successful and get bigger.
So they go from the 20 to the 40 to the 60?
And we allow tenants to move around.
Okay.
So if you sign a lease with us in say a 20,000 square foot space and you've outgrown it, if another 40,000 opened up somewhere else, we will let you get out of that lease and move to the 40. And vice versa. If someone's looking for a space that they want to go in and you're in it, so say someone else is in that 40, and it makes more sense for them to go to a different building, we work with tenants and move them around. We've done that many, many times to help them grow and retain their business here. But for SWOT analysis, obviously our strength is what you said earlier. It's that the community comes together here to get things done.
Yeah.
I mean, we all row in the same direction. We were talking about something else recently, and if you like, I'm a very visual person, and I like to look at things that way. So if you look at a lot of communities, they'll be on, say, the Racket River, all on inner tubes going down it. They're going in the same direction, but they're not together. We're on the raft. Everyone here is in the same boat on the raft, rowing down the river, trying to make that to make us be successful. So it's definitely our strength. The other strength, which everyone knows, is really our closeness to the border. I've talked to several people, organizations and chambers in Canada, and what they'll tell you is if you're a Canadian business, especially in Quebec, and you want to be in the U.S., Plattsburgh's a no-brainer. I mean, if you're there, you can come down here, check out the site, talk to your management team, and be back home for dinner.
Yeah.
So it's hard to overcome that. When I first got involved in this job, I couldn't figure out why we were getting business in Vermont wasn't, because I always hear Vermont, in Burlington, and you start to talk to the business leaders and from Canada, they don't want to be in Burlington, they want to be in Plattsburgh. Come right down 87, boom, boom, you're there.
Yeah.
And so they come to Plattsburgh, and so that's definitely a strength. Weaknesses, we never have enough space. And which is indicative of when we start putting a building up, we have people talking to us right away. They want it. And then what you were talking about earlier, it's the wraparound services, it's the housing, it's the number of employees you have. And as businesses come in, there's a tendency, if it's a higher paying job, for them to take employees from the lower paying organizations, and puts them in a bind. So we need more people. It's definitely our weakness, but we are not alone in that. That's a worldwide phenomenon.
So, when you talk about not enough space, you're not talking about physical, like places to put buildings. It's just if like there's enough land, right? At this point, it's just a matter of like physically getting the buildings up and having someone come in amongst all.
Yeah, it's kind of both. I mean, we have the land, but if you talk to Billy Jones and Mike Cashman and everybody, everything needs to be shovel ready. No one, it's like you said earlier when we were talking, no one's patient for anything anymore. So you need things shovel ready. So when someone comes and wants to start talking to you about putting a building up, they want, sometimes they want to know, okay, can I get in there, right away? So how long is it going to take you to put a building up? The infrastructure is very important. So you you do need the land. There is land, and I'm sure, as Mike probably said to you when you talked to him a couple weeks ago about what we're doing on the old county airport.
You mentioned it, yeah. But you can say it again, yeah.
Yeah, so we're right now we're working through. We're putting about a 3,000 foot long roadway in there, which is a joint effort between the county, the town, and TDC, and with some grants from the Northern Border and EDA organizations to fund that, to get that road in. And so that's going to open up a huge amount of space. I think it's about 400 acres in there altogether. And so we can now start doing more buildings back and through there. So we're
and that's going back behind where you guys are now.
Yep, it's right back behind us in Norrisk and Monahan Medical. So that'll go in there. That'll give us somewhat shovel ready. It won't be completely all of it on that road will be, but then if you want to extend deeper, you're going to have to extend the services. So that's there. But then physical buildings, there's not enough physical buildings around to handle potential business to come in. It's hard to market when you have nothing to market.
So when you talk about like 3,000, that's it's about 60% of a mile, whatever you want to call that, 6/10 of a mile, I guess is the easier way to say it. How many buildings do you think you can get up in a space like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It depends on the size of the building. When we look at, if you're asking earlier about 2008 to 2018 to now, one of the things that's changed is companies are looking for bigger buildings. So the sweet spot used to be around 20,000 square feet. Now we're seeing 60 to 100,000 square feet. So when you talk about the space along that roadway, if you just took on the roadway, it's about 30 acres of potential land right off that roadway. Now you can make it more by going deeper and deeper on the west side. But you pretty much got about 30 acres of buildable space, maybe 50. And then if you back it up, you could put, you can probably add another 100. But so probably 4 to 5 buildings at the 60,000 square foot space.
And just for context, which buildings right now are 60,000? Like, is the new Mediska, is that 60,000?
Yep.
Okay. So Monahan's about 60 then, ballpark?
I'm not sure the size of Monahan. I think it's bigger. I'm going to guess Monahan's more like 150 to 200.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm guessing.
Yeah.
But
I was going to say, because the Norsk one's big, but Monahan's kind of tucked back. I mean, it's further back, so you don't get to see it as well. But
just looking at the front side of it, I think it's
a bit, it's there.
It's bigger. Yeah, it's a big building.
And, okay, so I mean, once you get... But you wouldn't necessarily, you're not building these. It's just like you said, ground, like everything's like shovel ready.
Everything's getting shovel ready. Yep.
But that's enough to attract people with building plans or whatever.
Yes,
like,
absolutely. Yep.
Futuristic scales. So how long, I mean, I'm just going to say it, then I'll let you kind of deviate off of it. How long does it take from shovel ready to we have an existing building standing?
It depends.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that. So I was like, I'll let you just kind of give me the good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, I mean, so... What we've traditionally put up is warehouse shells that can be used for light manufacturing or warehouse distribution. That takes about a year, So the building that Mediska's going in right now, we started about this time last year. And if we hadn't made an agreement with them to upgrade that building to full-scale manufacturing, I can go into what that does to it a little bit if you want, but we would have been done that building by probably June, June, July.
It's about 6 months, 7 months?
Yeah, I'd say 9-10 months, yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's right. Yeah, we're October, yes.
Yeah, so, if we'd started in September, we would have had that building up and going. We could have done maybe temporary occupancy probably around May, but really to have it all done would have been June, July. With them putting upgrades and putting better HVAC, sprinkler systems are important now for fire suppression. In and outfitting labs and everything, it's an 18-month.
And this is this also with delays in supply chain and a million other things?
Yeah, I'd say 18 months for that building is not. We did have delays in that building, but 18 months maybe could have gained a couple months without COVID type supply chain issues.
So is that an acceptable amount of time? Like relative to other competition, like does that keep you competitive, or is that kind of leading the speed?
No, I think it keeps us competitive. I wouldn't say it's leading the speed.
So other places can go much faster? I
wouldn't say they go much faster. I think if you had a builder that was completely lined up and you're building the same thing over and over and over, you maybe could do it quicker.
Okay.
But knowing that we do changes and everything, and you're dealing with a business that is not quite sure what they want in the building where they want it as you're going, you're kind of making it up as you go. It kind of slows you down.
So when you think of like if people come down here and they look at Plattsburgh, I'm guessing they're also looking at other sites or
Absolutely.
So like when you're up against competition that way, it would be like me saying like I'm going to go to meet you at your house to possibly list your house. Like, well, I'm meeting with 5 other agents, which is fine, And then but you have like okay, you're trying to whatever that looks like in your field. So like when you guys are going up against other. It would be more locations, right? It wouldn't really be much different because they're trying to get the same services. Just matter of like,
Yeah.
So does that become like, obviously there's competitiveness there, but do you find that like that competition I'm going to say you win those more than you lose those? Or is it pretty much like, no, it's really dependent on the person or the company?
Yeah, I think it's dependent on. You got to go back and look at what they're looking for. What their value proposition is, and if it's like I said before, if it's a company in Quebec coming down, where we lead with location, proximity matters.
Yep.
So we're so much closer to them, so that will give us a one up. And then the cost to build, the timing, the wraparound services, the labor, housing, all that stuff, they're going to take that into account, taxes and all that. I mean, I think the area that we compete the most with is Texas. And if you look at companies that make a decision on coming here or not, what I've seen the last 4 or 5 years is the decision is really between us and Texas.
And do you think there's a reason for one or the other? Like, is there something like well, Texas has this and we can't really beat that, or vice versa?
Taxes,
that's what I was guessing, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you find that the taxes in New York hurt you guys, or is there ways that you can work around it, or like any type of...
I don't think it hurts us. There's no manufacturing tax.
Okay.
So I don't think it hurts us. I think people that come to Plattsburgh understand that and they want to be, it's the location that drives it. Because, the bulk of our companies are from Canada and they want to be there. Or they're companies that want to service New York State, right? So, Bombardier, Nova and stuff. So so Plattsburgh is a viable option for them.
How many, I would call it what was it, auxiliary company? Like when you bring in the big, you bring in like a Nova bus and they have all these little small companies that kind of support the bigger,
Yeah.
The Queen Bee or whatever you want to call it. Like how many of those do you try to draw in or do you see come in? Or like if Nova leaves, is there, 10 other companies that are leaving with it at like a 50-person capacity versus 1,000?
Yeah. So the suppliers that come in and work with Nova or Bombardier particularly, that's definitely when a big company comes in, they draw some of these smaller companies because a lot of the companies like to outsource stuff now and not do it in-house. So it's definitely, when they're coming in, it's definitely a win for us as a community that they come in. And then when they leave, it's definitely a risk. I mean, that is a risk with Nova leaving. There are companies in our community that support Nova.
And that's it? They just support Nova?
Some support Nova and others, some just support Nova. And
so those are pretty much, are probably known that they're going to follow suit and take off. Or can they pivot and go do something different?
Hopefully they pivot.
Yeah.
So I know the ones that are in that position are trying to pivot.
So on something like that, we were talking about it a little bit before, but like Nova Bus, let's say they're there for another 18 months or something. Is the time it takes to potentially fill that space, how's that process work? When Wyeth left, you have this massive, building. I'm sure it's still very, technologically, suitable to a lot of places. Is that an easy transition? Is that a quick transition? Is that like, well, that building's gonna be vacant minimum of a year? Or is it kind of like, no, like within a month we could have someone moving in there? Like, how's that process work logistically, I guess?
Yeah, so when we know so we don't own the Nova business building, but if we know when we have someone leaving, if they give us a heads up, not re-signing a lease, we will start a soft marketing of that, usually 3 to 4 months before that it's going to be available. And then usually when someone leaves a space, we'll go in and see what we need to do to spruce it up, renovate it, whatever needs to be done while they're not there, and get it ready. But our expectation is within 6 months it's going to be leased.
Okay.
Yeah, that I've not seen. Knock on Formica.
Yeah.
I've not seen a space sit. It's good and bad. We're 100% full, which is good, and it's also bad because we like to market the region. So as companies leave, I guess I have no other choice than see it as an opportunity for someone else to come in.
So, like right now, you said we're at 100% capacity. We have nothing else to basically sell or rent out. So now is like you talked about the road, talking about new buildings. Like, is that like? Because again, I'll use Billy and Mike just because there's a lot of overlap. I asked both of them, like, how do you guys plan? And the same thing for TDC. Like, how do you guys plan at the beginning of the year? What our master plan's going to be? Whether it's for the year to, I mean, I'm sure this is right up your alley. But if you were to plan that out, how good are you at sticking to that plan? And I think I asked Billy, and he's like, "Yep, we do it." And about 3 days later, we crumple it up and throw it out the window because just things are coming so quick. And I'm speaking from, again, on a very small operation. I look at what I want to accomplish in a year, break it down basically by priority or what's going to make the biggest impact early on. And then I really try each day to block off time to work on that before my craziness goes. And I'm trying to get better at, I heard this phrase one time and I kind of go back to it a lot. Like I'm allowing little bad things happen in order to get like really good big things done. And I've gotten better at that, which it's not an easy thing because you want to just always be like, yes, I'll get rid of that or I'll go do that. But I find that in order for me to really make progress, I have to really focus on those big ticket items. So when you guys line your dominoes up at the beginning of the year, how good are you about just hitting the first domino, second domino versus crumble up the game plan, throw it out the window, and then you're just getting berated with day-to-day stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's background noise, I call it, what you're talking about, the little issues. I mean,
yeah.
So, I mean, you need to put those here and manage those in a separate stream than what your goals are for the year. I'd say we're pretty good at lining up what our goals are for the year. We go through and do a capital plan for 10 years and looking at our buildings, what we're going to do around maintaining them, and making sure that we have money aside to not just maintain them, but bring them keep them up to the current day standards.
Yep.
And elevate them in that fashion. So we're really good at following that, and it's paid dividends for us. We also do a lot of work with workforce development. We put money aside for that. We put money aside for educational stuff. All that stuff goes on no matter what's happening. We budget for it. We do it. We support different organizations and things that happen throughout the year, and that happens. Now, with that said, we haven't had any big catastrophes that would say, whoa, this is going to knock us off our game. What are we going to do? Mm-hmm. What we do is we game that, though. So, we once a quarter take a look at what's happening with not only our business, but the businesses around us. And, a good example is like SteerX is leaving, right? So,
yep.
And so there's going to be 2 buildings sitting there open now.
Not part of yours?
Not part of ours. So how does that impact us, and how does that impact the community and the availability of space? So we'll game that out and say, okay, does that make us change what we were planning on doing the rest of this year and for the next 5 years? And so we'll go through that and game that out and say, what's the impact to us and to the community? So we don't pivot. I don't like overreacting. Okay. I'm not someone who panics on much. Not much scares me. So actually had a president of division once said, "I'm worried nothing scares you," and I'm like, well, did someone die? And the answer is no. I said, well, then we'll live. So, we'll work through the problem, work the problem. It's always my solution to things, and not to panic. And usually it's worked out for me. So that's how I approach it. And so we don't get knocked off our game too often.
So, because you have so much knowledge, or so many years of experience too, that just like when you look at, because one of the things you said, like you didn't bring work home, nothing really bothers you, not like, has this taken time to build up that tolerance? Because usually I think as you get older, you have less cares. I'll keep it PG, but like, less cares to give kind of thing. And I feel like, it's like I'm trying to develop that kind of muscle a little bit in my own business of like, okay, just, I get hit with a lot of stuff, but just, I got 3 young kids. So it's like, can I get my stuff done, still make make all their games, make all their big functions, and then, but still like make sure we're moving forward and taking care of business, but also not being overwhelmed and being stressed to no end. Like, how do you deal with all that, and how do you deal with potentially, I guess, your date? Let's start there. I have follow-ups on that. But how do you keep your wits about you when everything's just like happening? Because you're not just someone that's going in, punching the clock and leaving. Like, you're making big decisions, you're involved, you're at higher level. I'm assuming a lot of cognitive, like, I wouldn't say stress, but cognitive, like working your brain quite a bit each and every day or week. Like, how do you kind of manage all that?
Yeah. First off, I love it.
Okay.
So that's, if you knew me well, I love the game. Yeah. So, as they would say, right?
Yeah,
so that never has stressed me out in my life. It's not something I grew into. I've never, maybe in my 20s, I wasn't that way. I don't know. But I love the game. And I've never thought of myself as being the smartest person in the room. So I don't try to solve everything myself. I tried, like I said before, surround myself with really good people, especially with complementing strengths that I know they have experiences I don't have and knowledge. And I listen to them. And and when their advice is good, I follow it. I don't panic. Also, how do I, when I say don't take my work home, I used to work. So my previous job, when I had sites, I'd be up at 4 a.m. with Australia, and then I'd go do my day job, I'd call it, in Rouse's Point, and then I'd be on the phone until 10 o'clock. Sorry, I'd be up at 4 a.m. with Europe, and then I'd go do my day job in the afternoon, in the day, in Rouse's Point. Then I'd be with Australia until about 10, 11 o'clock at night doing meetings. So I worked all the time. And I did not mind that. I actually enjoyed it. And I love solving problems with solutions and stuff. And I'm just not someone who goes back. So, it's when you look at something's going wrong, I don't like people that sit there and start saying, how did you miss that? What'd you do that? It's like, we can deal with that later. Let's focus on finding a solution to the problem. Yeah. And then we'll do a postmortem later. I don't to me, that's noise. Okay, we need to figure that out so it doesn't happen again. But focus on, let's get through this, figure out the solution, and make us better. And I've never panicked. I had a quality person once say to me, "I don't know how you stay so calm in the crisis of the pharmaceutical world, which can be very high stress. Trust me." And it's just my personality is how I'm made up. I don't panic. Not much scares me, and I just take things one at a time. And not that I do multitask quite well, but
do you find that obviously being in a leadership position, that rubs off on everybody else when they see you're not sweating, they're not sweating?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think definitely people look to you. I mean, I learned this early on when I took over the Rouse's Point site. Hey, you need to own it, because the buck stops with you. Yeah. I can't blame Joe or Sue over here anymore. It's like, no, this is my decision. This is what we're doing. I know you're not all going to like it. Some will, some won't, but I'm okay with that, right? I mean, at some point in life, you realize not everybody needs to be your friend, right? Yeah. I mean, early on in life, I think you want everyone to be your friend and stuff. Doesn't mean you aren't friendly to them and nice to them, but if they don't like you, sometimes that's okay, right? So I don't let that get to me. And I think most people like me, but I know there's some people that probably don't. Yeah. And I'm okay with that. Yeah. That's my opinion, their problem, not mine. So so you stop caring about that as much. So you start owning things. And you also learn that words are important. And so when you're up talking in front of 2,000 people, that their livelihoods are based on what you're saying, you are really careful with the words you use and how you say it. I learned that lesson early on, probably my early 40s. You got to be really careful what you say sometimes. And so that's important. So I think when you do those kind of things, if you do it right, people see that and they do respond. Integrity is big to me. Being truthful, owning your mistakes are all huge to me.
So, because again, selfishly, I'm jumping on some of these. So like because that's something I've been trying to develop too, of the, like, I don't care, not like I don't care about a person, I don't care what they think, and I do it more of like, if it's what I want to do and I've thought it through. I'm not a very impulse person, meaning I'll think through the stuff to make sure that I'm making a good decision, and not a decision where I'm nitpicking it, but I'm just like, I just want to make sure I feel like I have all the information I need, and then I'll make a decision. And then once I do that, then same thing. Like I can live with my decisions, and I'm always kind of like my guiding star on most things is I base it off of intent, meaning if I'm doing it with the right intent and I try to treat people the way they want to be treated, those are really the only two things I focus on. So my thing is if I can go to bed at night knowing I did the right thing, can sleep well at night, then I'm fine. And someone may not like that, and that's not like you said, that's their opinion, not mine. I can't control that. And I think that's done well for me. Has it kept me up at night or maybe think about it or stress out on certain things? Yes, but I've learned, I mean, as with anything, the bad things stay in your mind for a couple days or a week, and then you forget all about them. And it's never been the opposite. It's always stayed that way. They just kind of like wash off. So
yeah, I mean, it's interesting. As an individual, you always think that something that happened to you that everyone else is. It's like the center of their world too. They're paying attention to it. So I'll give you an example. I mean, early on with the closure of the Rouse's Points, I used to get interviewed all the time on TV or by the press, and I was misquoted once, and I was really not happy. so the editor and I had a conversation, but the reality is, so that would have been in the paper for one day. 2 days later, no one would have known or cared.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so you always think.
Oh, so was it changed prior, or did it go out?
They changed, but they put it online at night. It was wrong. So, but even in that case, what I learned is, especially if you're public speaking and stuff, you say something wrong, just keep going, because most of the people have no idea what you're talking about anyways.
Listening. Yeah.
They're not listening, or they don't understand. They don't have the background. So unless it's something so egregious, just keep going forward and move on and not overthink. So I'm not an overthinker. I really do not believe in overthinking things. I think, I'd rather have a decision than no decision, right? To me, a decision that's based off 80% of what you need to know is better than trying to get 100%, where they say perfection's the evil of good, right? So I mean, I do believe that. I think, good enough is probably good enough. And so if you wait to get perfection, you're never going to get anything done. So I have a bias for action. And I think that people should be making decisions, moving forward, and learn from them.
Because I mean, as a CEO, like one of your main roles is decision making. Yeah, like that's pretty much what it is. And I think you get to a certain point where I heard this, and this obviously, is an extreme example, but I heard this guy once say, like, at some point in time, as you keep growing, like your job is going to be to read like a book a day, basically. Where like you don't have to do a lot of the work because your decision making has to be so good. And I think he was quoting Warren Buffett on this, and they talk about Warren Buffett reads hours and hours a day because he's just reading reports and stuff. But then he'll make one move a year tops. But he spent all this time just with such a selective thing. But like that one move made billions of dollars. Yeah. But it's like such a so like I feel like at a certain point, like right now, you're not on the line doing a bunch of things. No. Like you're at the point where you're like, okay, David, we need you to make one or two big decisions this year that kind of like set the tone. And then you make those, but you have a lot of input on them. But right, am I right in thinking that?
Absolutely right. I mean, you're more strategic. Yeah, there's more strategy involved in what. The higher up you go, I don't want to say you don't work as hard. It's different. Yeah, like you said, it's more of a mental. It's more strategy. It's more thinking out, looking at the big picture, looking forward. Some looking back, and trying to think what's the direction you want to take. Are we doing the right things? And definitely, and I read a lot, so I love reading. Yeah, I constantly read. I'm reading all the time, and so it's definitely a different role. How I tell you how I was successful in my early years was I outworked people. Yeah, like I said, I to this day I'm never the smartest person in the room. I know I'm not. I mean, if you looked at I don't know where I sat, but if you looked at where I sat in my high school class, I guarantee you I was not in the top 20. And there was like 260 kids in my class. I think, was I in the top 100? I don't know, maybe. But all those kids that were smarter than me, I have outworked them, and that was always my approach: outprepare, outwork. I still do it to this day. If I know I'm going into a difficult conversation, I look at every angle. What could I be hit with, and how can I be better prepared than the person that's going to come at me?
And like you said, and this is, I think if someone asked me like a hobby, and I think you kind of pointed on for you, like I love learning and I love researching and and it's not like it could be random stuff. I go down like a rabbit hole online and start like Wikipedia. Next thing I know, I'm like layers deep and I'm learning about something that I'm like, how did I got to go back to see what I was even looking at to get to this level. But there's a lot of stuff just business wise, like you said, it's like what's the next natural progression, or what's the next thing that I have to learn to like break through. And most of the stuff, if I was like, okay, I hit a certain level in my business, I'm like, I could ride this wave for 30 more years, be very, whatever. I like be fine.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? I get bored. And my thing is like, I want to stress I want a stressor on me, meaning I want to challenge myself to.
Well, your brain's a muscle. So,
yeah.
I mean, you need to exercise it.
Yeah. So I feel like every day when you say like reading, like same thing, it could be reading this, it could be reading a blog, could be reading, physical books. It could be rereading books. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm trying to, I was reading more last year book-wise. Like I tried to have a certain amount of numbers of books. And then I found, which was fine, I hit my goal. I wanted to read 60 books, and I read like 63 or 64 books. And this was between listening, audiobooks, and reading. And then I got to this year, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to hit that number again. And I've probably have read 20 books this year. But I'll tell you, I've reread books. I've read half of books and not finished them, just because I wasn't getting anything out of it. So I'm like, why get to the end just to say you got to the end?
I could show you on here too. I've stopped several books. It's like, it's not worth my time.
Well, and I heard a good quote once about what was it? Take 100 minus your age. There's a guy, this is an author I follow quite a bit. He said, take 100 minus your age. And so for me, I'm 33 now. So it said basically by page 77, if it's not grabbing you, just put it down.
Yeah.
And then obviously, however old you are, David, you would work that way.
A little bit older than that.
So let's say you hit page 60. We'll put it at 60 for you. But let's say you hit page 60, like whatever that is, then it's like, because at the end of the day, it's like as you get older, you kind of know what's going to resonate better, and you kind of already filtered through a lot of whatever the input is. So now I'm really trying to go more like niche in certain categories and go deeper there than trying to go super broad, because I'm like, I kind of did that, and now I know these things are popping out now. So let me just focus on those versus trying to constantly read for volume. I want to now read more for understanding, or read more for competency in some stuff. And then once I get that, that's probably going to open up another door. I'm like, okay, now I'm going to go down that path and learn it versus. Yeah. So how do you approach that?
Well, you're learning the value of time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as you get, I didn't, who the gentleman was that came up with that calculation, but basically what he's saying is, as older you get, the more you understand the value of your time. Yeah. And I'm not going to waste it on things that don't grab my attention, right? So if I'm starting to do something, I started a book yesterday and stopped 10 pages in. And if you do the math, that's not how old I am. Okay. But I stopped 10 pages.
I was going to say, you've aged very well then.
Yeah, right. And I just realized, I put it aside. Maybe I'll go back to it someday, but it's not grabbing me. I don't want to read it. So I'll find something else. And yeah, I mean, you look for things that interest you, and that I like to look for things that are different, that give me different exposures and come from a different direction in how I think sometimes, to get a broad perspective. And then it just helps. I think it's so easy to be insular in your life, especially when you live in a small community like this, and not get out of your space. I mean, I think if you talk to the average person in Clinton County, how many times did they get out of Clinton County, other than maybe flying to Florida for a week on the beach?
Break. Yeah.
I mean, how much are they really getting out in the world? It's probably a really small percentage. So one way to do that is read, right? So if you can't get out, have the time or the money, the resources, or you're just afraid to travel, you can read, right? And that can bring you to different places. So reading to me is really important to do that. It's one way to experience things that you might not be able to.
And when you talk about like reading, when you say like history, like what kind of books do you gravitate towards? Like these historical autobiography books, or maybe biography, I should say.
Yeah, I like reading about Lincoln and different. I really try to tie things to leadership roles. Some of the great wars and stuff, some of the leaders, and try to do that. I had the fortune to spend a week in Gettysburg once. It was the guy I was working for at the time in Wyeth brought his leadership team there, and we would spend the morning being lectured on leadership and how Lincoln approached leadership. And then in the afternoon, we'd walk all the hallowed grounds and walk the battlefields and get a total explanation of what happened where. So it was really pretty interesting. It really grabbed my attention on well, I think I want to learn about some of these leaders, some of these people that went through these really difficult situations in their life and found a way to lead men and women through it.
So how, like, what was, like, if you could kind of say in like a nutshell of Lincoln's leadership, how was his?
Oh, Lincoln, if you ever had heard the term keep your friends close but your enemies closer, I really believed that. So Lincoln tried to bring people from the different political factions together on his leadership group. So he believed in inclusion, in trying to include people, and that's one way I have approached how I lead. I don't look at it that they're my enemies. I look at it that I try to bring different points of view and thought processes together. But he definitely, the politicians today could learn a lot from Lincoln, how to govern.
He wasn't very political though, right? Or was he?
No, I don't think he was political.
I mean, political meaning like very. He was pretty moderate, I would think.
Yeah.
So like just to say leadership, what leaders do you look up to, or what leaders historically, or even now that you would look up to?
Yeah. Well, I look up to, like I just said, Lincoln. He's if you ask me who I'd want to have dinner with, I'd love to have the opportunity to sit down.
You sure you haven't listened to these podcasts? My last couple, no. I pulled some questions off, and one of them was actually, it was funny. So I said to Billy. Billy said Teddy Roosevelt. Asked Cashman. He said Franklin Roosevelt, and then you just said Lincoln. It could be anybody in the world. You guys all pick all presidents.
So. Yeah, those are good choices.
They're all great choices. But I was like, Jesus, like just like random people say, like no, like all presidents. So that's cool.
Yeah. Who do I look up to today? I mean, that's hard to do without getting political.
Well, I mean, just it could be history too. Like anybody that you're, and it doesn't have to be politics. I mean, just in general, if they're leading something, it could be a baseball manager, it could be running a company.
Well, I like Derek Jeter.
The captain.
There
right?
you go.
The captain.
He's a captain.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Yankees. Yeah. So, I don't know. There's no one I can really pull out of my head that I'm going to say I would follow, through with today. I mean, everyone has different aspects, I think, of what they do that I like. I mean, there's no one person that's perfect, right? I mean, different people bring different things to the table, strengths and weaknesses, and so there's certain things I like about different people and what they do, and without getting unfortunately most of the things now are politics, and I really not get into politics.
No, it's fine. Like I always look at, like, you hear like a Phil Jackson in sports, how he led a bunch of championships, and then you go to I mean, even back like John Wooden, like obviously the classic leadership, and I mean those are in the sport arena, and then you can go in political arena, and I think I think nowadays, which is, and again, I want to ask you this political science. You take let's take Biden, Trump. You got the last handful of presidents that have been very polarizing, or I say maybe aren't or are, but it's portrayed that way in the climate that we're in. Do you think that if you took a Lincoln, or if you took a Roosevelt, or if you took a FDR, or even a George Washington back in those days, and you pulled them into 2023, and you have all the technology and all the internet, and just, I mean, the capability that things happen across the world, we hear about it in split second and see it live. I mean, back then they were sailing across boats to hand deliver letters. Yeah. Do you think that the character of these people would be the same, different? Because I mean, at the end of the day, we're all, our DNA is the same. Like, there's not a whole lot of difference in 300 years. Would they have do you think reacted differently? Do you think they're just a product of where they were? Like, everybody puts Lincoln or puts, George Washington always on like the top list of best presidents, but if they were in 2023, would people be like, Lincoln's kind of a prick, or whatever they might bash him about, like his wife's or his kids, or what he did with this dealing with some other country? Like, do you think that would be more polarizing? I would think they'd be more polarizing now. Yeah.
I think the question you're asking is, does the situation make the person, or does the person make the situation, right? So, it's kind of like pain, right? So if you ever have knee surgery or anything, you forget the pain, and so you would go and do it again if you needed to have knee surgery again. Okay. And if you're a woman, maybe childbirth is the example. But I think there's probably a lot of things about Lincoln and some of the historical figures that they're not written about as much. So was Lincoln mean? Like you were saying. Probably some people would say he was too tough, So I do think in today's world with social media and everything, instant, gratification and messaging of everything that's happening, I think they'd all struggle. I think I don't really think there's one. If you talk about politicians that are there today, that they created the problems that are here today. I think it's been an evolution, and I think.
Oh yeah.
I think the internet is what started it, and I think AI is going to put it on steroids. But
well, so I think is the situation makes the person not like I
Yeah.
think most of these people like if they
I do too.
Yeah, like I think you're just thrown into. And again, I would say I feel like I'm a pretty good person. I guarantee if I was in the president role, I would have a lot of people that hate me, and I'd have a lot of people that love me, and I'd have a lot of bad, like not true stories said about me, and then things that are that are true that aren't publicized that are good or bad. And so a lot of it is. Media drives a lot, and like right now, it's you can always strip it down to money because like they want to go with what gets the clicks and sponsorship. So I mean, then you start that's a big business, and you're like, well, we're just reporting the news, and I'm like, I would say if most people took a poll, a very high percentage would say like, I don't think it's really just the news. Like there's always an ulterior motive, but so I do think it's hard to compare. And then you also think like over time, especially if you go like. They're a little bit more modern, but if you go 500 years ago and you're trying to say, is that King of England good or bad, or is that person back in the Roman Empire good or bad? We're only getting what was outlived by like transcriptions and things that were passed. Like who knows? Like maybe all the slandering stuff was burnt at some point because someone's like, I don't want them to know about that Pope, so here's all the good stuff about him.
Yeah,
or vice versa.
That's what I was trying to say before. We don't have the visibility to all the little things that went around that person because they didn't have social media, right? Everything wasn't online. There weren't people watching them, 23 out of 24 hours a day. So I think it's a total different reality. So those people I don't think are perfect. And I think if you read about some of the books that are written about some of them, they tell you, I mean, they are not perfect individuals.
This is something I actually got from reading because I think reading like can slow your mind down, allow you to relax, and I get thoughts as I read, and sometimes they just turn into weird stuff, but I think I've challenged my brain more where I start to have these moments where, not that they're good or bad, but they're just thoughts that I never would have had a handful of years ago. And it's kind of funny, but even just thinking about, let's say George Washington, or let's say, a Roman emperor, 1,500 years ago. And you start like, did they look much different? Not really. Like human-wise, they look about the same. They had to eat. They had to, they had the shower. They laughed at jokes. They think of everything that we do, and it's always funny. Like you put Ben Franklin or Leonardo da Vinci or Marcus Aurelius, or you put all like these people on a pedestal because they're from history, and you're like, they stubbed their toe. And I know this sounds funny, but like they did all these things that we do, like they forgot to grab something back in that day. Like, I forgot not the keys, but I forgot to grab like the loaf of bread to bring to the party. Like, crap. And like, now I got to run out and do that. And then like my kid's crying. And like, they all experienced all this stuff, but then like we only hear about these certain roles. But then when you like, well, they were a human. They lived 70 years. They had all these experiences. They had friends. They got sick. They had death. They had their first heartbreak. They had all these things that we experience as humans, but we always like, because we're living it, we seem like, oh, we have all these things, but they were perfect. I'm like, well, no, they're not. Like they picked their nose. They did like all these things that, and sometimes I put it in perspective of, and I do it a lot with, anytime I ever felt, and I don't do it as much anymore. I still do it a little bit, but not as much. When I first got in like the professional world, I was intimidated by older people because I was like, wow, I'm like 20 and therefore I don't know as much as they know. And then you realize that I might know more than someone that's older than me, but I might know less than someone that's younger than me. And then I also know that I don't have to be intimidated by someone that's 20 years older than me because at the end of the day, they're now kind of a peer of mine and I can learn from them, but I don't have to be intimidated as they're like this walk on water person. And having done so many podcasts and talking to a lot of people, then you realize like most people are just fun people, and they want to and they want to have fun and they want to talk about other stuff, and that's something that I've been trying to level the playing field. Or when you're like, I can't do that, I'm like, yeah, but that person did, and that person like had a bad day like I did, or that person like listens to the same music I like whatever. They played soccer. Like, and I know it's like simple, but in my mind it brings everybody back down to human. Like,
Yeah.
and that it's my way of not being intimidated by stuff, or even if I'm in a situation where, you know, if it's work or if it's something outside, or, you know, I look at it as like, okay, we're just people and we're having a conversation, and then like, how's the best way to go about it? But I don't feel, maybe it's a weird way of looking at it, but I try to humanize everybody.
It's the right way to look at it. I mean, when you first start public speaking, I was at a meeting a couple weeks ago, and this lady was speaking, and she said when she got to the microphone, "I'm not a good public speaker, but I'm very intelligent, so please bear with me."
Yeah.
And she was not a good public speaker, and part of it was she got herself so wrapped up she wasn't breathing. So one of the things you learn when you first public speak is breathe, right?
Yeah.
Don't. It's kind of like sports.
Yeah.
So I love skiing. When I first start skiing in December, I have to remind myself breathe, because
Don't think, like, just react.
breathe, because you stop breathing because you're and so public speaking is the same thing. So I was watching this woman basically hyperventilating trying to speak, and it's like something I learned a long time ago is make sure you breathe.
Yeah.
Right. And then the next thing is you're just talking to people. And if you're up talking to people and you just pretend that you're friends,
Yeah.
just look at like, I'm just talking to Galen. He's one of my friends, it's no big deal. And so you got to relax yourself and understand that everybody's the same. And everyone's
And you're usually talking about something you know.
right. So that's another key is people always say, what do you do for public speaking? How do you prepare? First off, you need to know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so if you know what you're talking about, then you can learn to relax. And do something that usually when I would speak in front of literally be thousands of people sometime, you need to get yourself opened up at first, right? So I'd always start with a joke or some light story about something real quick just to get centered.
Yeah.
And then you go into the conversation. And I could go on different strategies I have, but depending on what you're doing. But yeah, definitely know what you're talking about. If you don't know what you're talking about, you're in trouble.
Yes, and I find that most people are only nervous when they don't know what they're talking about, or they don't think they know what they're talking about.
Right.
And I, like my wife the other day had to do a presentation at Plattsburgh State, and she had speaking in front of like 200 people, and she was nervous about it. And I remember telling, I might have I kind of told her, and then I texted her before. I said, just remember, you know more about this than they do, and you're prepared, like you're fine, like you know what you're talking about. Just like tell people, like don't. And I think that's what most people get wrapped up, like, they're going to like think I'm a fraud. I'm like, no, like, or imposter syndrome. Like, I trust you, more than like you talk to me about it and I'm asking you questions and I'm like, you're talking to a bunch of kids that are in college that are probably half asleep still. I'm like, they're fine. Like they're not going to be judging you on it. But so then the question on, when you talk about time, like valuing time, because this is also something I've tried to get better at of like, when you said like the worth of your time, putting the book down, but like what things have changed, from early in your career to now, like what do you put your focus? How do you filter out what is not really important? How do you know what to prioritize or what to really put your energy into? Because I think at this point too, you've learned how to, conserve energy a little bit. Like right, I'm thinking like decisions and just kind of decision fatigue and things like that. Like how do you pick what you focus on? How do you pick on what you punt? Yeah,
I mean, you got to look at what your mission is, what you're trying to achieve, right? Mm-hmm. And if something is, I call it noise, background noise, is not going to get you to where you need to be. Like I said, I put it in a separate bucket. I put it over here. It doesn't mean I usually carry a small little notebook with me, and I'll jot something down. If something comes up that I think is going to pull me off mission, I'll write it down real quick. One of the strategies I've used is. And I used to do this in big operation meetings, and people would think you're not paying attention. I'd always have a laptop with me, and I'd be in a room with 20 people from a site, going through their operation. And I'd have a finance person that traveled with me, and sometimes a quality person. And I would be using my laptop to send them notes, take notes for myself, and send them things that's being said that we need to follow up on or dig deeper into. So. Use strategies to say, I don't want to go into this right now, but I want to focus on, how do we get we came here with the idea we want to get from A to D and not get caught up with something that's outside that. and what's important to the mission. Like I said before, did someone die? No one's going to die because of this. We need to stay on task and not get caught up. There's always people that will derail you. You get into a conversation, and you don't want to go into the weeds. You want to stay at a certain level. They'll start trying to drag you down into those weeds. It's always a value judgment you got to make. Not to offend them, but to move them off of that. And so, strategies I use is to not to say we're not interested in that, but that's great. We're going to put this over here and we're going to go through that later. And I want to focus more on this topic versus, deviating off to what you're talking about, which might have a lot of value, but it's not valuable for what we're trying to do today. So a lot of it is really laying out what you want to do when you're meeting with a group or when you're meeting, running a meeting is setting up a strong agenda, setting up, here's the goal of the meeting, going through that as you go through. And even if it's not in a meeting, it's just in your head. If you're looking at something, understanding as you're going into something, here's my goals individually I want to try to achieve. And if not on a piece of paper, mentally doing a check mark that, okay, I've addressed this. I'm talking about this. I got the answer I want out of it. And if someone or something starts trying to pull you off of that, come back to what the next thing is in your list of goals and not allow that to get sidetracked. It's more about trying to steer direction of conversations. Like I said, time can get short, right?
Yeah.
So, you don't want to get bogged down on things that are really not important.
One of the things I've tried, that's the other thing too, is I've gotten if you would have told me a year ago or 2 years ago, I'm way better at it now because I've been focusing on it for a while, is having that initial list. And then I usually meet every about 6 months, I kind of reevaluate the next 6 months. I have a kind of a plan for a few years out, but I really look at what's the action steps over 6 months. Because I think 3 months for me on certain things it'd be a little too frequent, and then a year would be too much. I kind of like the half-year breakdown. But I do think things come up, and I have spreadsheets and stuff where it's okay, I have it. That's going to be on there, so I don't, like you said, so I don't forget it. But I really, and I will actually bring that in the 6 months as okay, now I'm going to bring what I'm working on, what I want to work on, and maybe some new stuff. And if any of that, based on what I've done, could have taken the place, or could this thing I thought was important actually get punted, which every 6 months there's a big pillar. I'm you know what? That's not going to be a thing now. And I feel like that's kept me on track. I think and like I said, I'm not super old, but I think I'll turn into a crotchety old man a little bit earlier than other people. Is that I'm now getting to the point where I want to say no more to people. Yeah. And it's like I said, you go where you want to be everybody's friend, and I want to be friendly to everybody, but I'm not trying to do stuff because I want people to like me. So I look at now between work and 3 young kids that my time I'm going to be selfish with. It's either going to go to work, it's going to go to my kids, or it's going to go to something I actually want to do in the free time I have. Where, when someone asks hey, I have this event coming up or this party or this thing, are you going to go to it? And usually the default answer for most people is yeah, well, let me check and I'll get back to you. And they know they're not going to do it. I'd rather just say, you know what, I appreciate it. That's not going to happen. Yeah. And I've said that more this year than I ever have in my life combined, because I'm kind of you know what, I know I won't go to that. Yeah. And I think it's great. And I really appreciate you inviting me. There's a 0% chance I'm showing up to that event. Yeah. I say it nicely, but I also don't want to leave it where there's I want to be black or white, yes or no, not hey, I'll get back to you, and then I either feel obligated to do it because I'm I probably should do it because I'm gonna, whatever thought in my head makes me think that, or then I finally just come back, hey, you know what, and I'm I'm just wasting time because that's something that weighs on me and I have to make a decision. I can just nip it in the bud now and I'm out and
I call that straight talk. So being upfront with people and not mixing words sometimes and not leading people on or giving them false hope. It's definitely, you hit on it. You learn to say no more than yes, right? Mm-hmm. So if it's something you don't want to do, no. And we used to do this. We'd go down through the list, every quarter through the year and look at the things we had listed we're going to do and say, what can we say no to on here that we're not going to get done? We don't have enough time to do everything. What doesn't hold the value now that we're looking backwards and forwards from when we set this list together? The other thing I do is every night I make out a list of what I'm doing the next day. What's important to me to achieve tomorrow. I do it every night, and when I get to the next morning, doesn't mean someone can't have an argument to change what I'm doing, but I pretty much try to stay on that focus unless something comes along and does that. I also have what I call a BHAG list.
Big, audacious, hairy goal, whatever it is.
Yep. So
Big, hairy, audacious goal.
Yep. So I love BHAGs. And so if someone comes along with something and I think it's far-reaching and it's a great idea and it's big, I put it on our BHAG list. It never comes off for the year. Then we get to the end of the year and we look at what we've done for our BHAGs. And quite frequently I introduce that to the staff at TDC because we used to do that a lot in my previous career. And they embrace it, and we actually do BHAGs. And at first, it was funny. They thought it was hysterical.
So it's once a year you do that?
We come up with a list. You can add to it at any time.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and nothing ever comes off the list
until it's done.
Until it's done, or when you get to the next year and say we want to reevaluate. Should that be on the BHAG list? And should we take it off or not? An example would be our office building. So we built a 5,000 square foot office building that was on the BHAG list to start. And that's back when we were sharing space in one of our other buildings that was being used for manufacturing. And, nobody wanted to spend the money to build its own standalone building. And, got on our BHAG list and we worked through the pros and cons of doing it and refined that, and finally presented it. And we ended up getting the approval to build the building. And everyone on the board now would tell you it was the right thing to do, having our own standalone professional type building. And but that came off a BHAG list.
So how many items go on the BHAG list a year typically?
12.
Okay,
a little more than 10. Yeah.
So they're all, let's say 10 or 12. They can all be accomplished in about. I mean, I know it's not straight, like in a month you're taking one off, but like realistically, your goal is to try to get one of those off probably a month.
Nah, that's too much. They're big. Okay. They're usually big ideas.
So even though there's 12, knowing you're not going to accomplish them in a year,
no.
But you'll still keep them up there?
Yep.
And then how do you is there a way to prioritize them?
Don't prioritize them.
Okay.
No, there's no judgment. It's like you can put anything you want on the BHAG list. Now, if it's something simple, we're going to say it doesn't really fit a BHAG, right? It's not. It's got to be big. It's got to be something that's groundbreaking that you're thinking, wow, okay. Yeah, we won't do them all in the year. If we get 2 of them done in a year, that's good. So
okay,
it's not something you're planning on doing every day.
Yeah, like I would say that I have on like I said, if 6 months, there's probably like 4 things I try to do in 6 months, and typically I get through 2 to 3 of them guaranteed.
But these aren't things that you're doing on a normal operation. These are things that are like, wow, wouldn't it be great to have this?
So I'll actually watch this. So, I mean, we haven't actually looked up anything today.
Wouldn't it be wouldn't it be great to have a daycare center in one of our buildings? Okay, there's a BHAG. That's on
for
our
you guys.
Yeah, that's on one of our BHAGs right now. Wouldn't it be great to put a daycare center in our park?
So I would say like we have. I mean, I got a bunch of stuff up here, but like this was so put in perspective. Like we have our my mid-year, so I have a bunch of stuff kind of on this living document. If I scroll all the way over, these are all things that we got done that I would say, if you look up here, most of these things going down were big things that need to be done in the office. They're not like, because I try to limit shiny objects for me. So I really try to focus on if it's going to be like, I bought this building about a year ago. I spent 10 weeks going through this building, doing what I need to get done, hired out some work, did a lot of work, myself. That was like a big thing, so that got crossed off.
Yeah, buying this building's a big thing.
Yeah, and then moving us in here and getting things up and running. But it was 10 weeks of like living here basically, and that's what I did.
To me, the BHAG would be the decision to buy the building. Everything else beyond that is just, okay, that's the result of buying the building. That you had to go through and renovate it. Okay,
so I guess the way I looked at it was buying, getting up, fully operational, like because I wanted to check that off. That like it's done. I don't have to do it again. I mean, minor stuff, but like it's done. And then as we went through most of it, like things that we did were like revamping major systems that we had that took months to do because I'm not going to talk like how to think through it because you've done plenty of this in your career, but all the little steps and then the thinking and the processing and kind of like figuring it all out. And the amount of stuff that we've done in a year by doing this is tremendous, but more than we've ever made or progress we've made. And now I'm trying to get to the point, like you said, if you're going through all this stuff and you have deadlines and you have certain things, like each thing is a stepping stone up. And in the long term of kind of like where I'd want to go, they all build towards that, or they free me up to work on different things. And I think my biggest thought process on that is, if you, like, I know, like, I'm trying to punt little things to get those big things done. And it's hard because you like want to not let things fall through the cracks, or you want to not let people down, or you want it, but then I'm slowly getting to the point where I'm becoming more comfortable with that. And I think it's only going to progress more extreme, where I'm like, you know what? I don't mind that someone's on my case for 3 days on something that I literally just punted, because I'm like, you know what? That takes 10 minutes, but I don't want to give that 10 minutes up right now. And, but I think over time these build, and I think because, like you said, the building of the muscle in my head is kind of building off, where it's, you know, I'm getting stronger at making these decisions, but I hope, like, you know, 10 more years when I'm your age, you know, that when you, like, my goal is that, like, learning from people like yourself, or just reading and keep getting better, that I'm way better than I was 5-10 years ago. And I hope that I'm blowing myself out of the water in 5 to 10 years from now, where I'm just constantly getting better. But I can feel a shift in how I'm thinking. I can feel a shift in how I'm reacting. And most of it's internal, where it's like how I feel based on stuff. Like, I might have felt uncomfortable doing this.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're not going to be better. You're just going to be more comfortable, easier making that decision. Just, I'm going to do this, or I'm not doing it. Yeah. You know, I'm going to take this chance, or I'm not going to. You know, it's just, the stakes won't seem as big to you.
Yes, or like you said, you don't care what people think as much. So that's what most of us are afraid of making decisions, is because of what people will think, and then you realize, like, nobody.
Half the people aren't paying attention.
That's it. Like, you're in your own world, and I try to go back to that. I'm like, that person doesn't care what I'm doing.
Yeah, I tell my kids this all the time. It's like, because they'll be dealing with a professor or someone, and I'll say, you know, you got to remember, you're not the center of their universe, so you're waiting for a response from them. Yeah, they're not going home and saying, I got to respond. This is the most important thing I have to do. I mean, they have lives, right? Yeah. So they'll get back to you in their time. Just relax.
Yeah. And then I go back to, like, human. Like, they want to watch Netflix tonight. They don't want it. They're tired.
And don't take it as a reflection on what they think about you. Yeah. Because it has nothing to do with you. Yeah. Right? I mean, they're in their little world, and they'll look at your thing eventually, and they'll respond to you.
I also think, too, if you if you get caught up in that, but you also get caught up in, not that they don't care about you, but there's so many things going on that I also go back to. And I think you kind of put it, like, how is someone dealing with something where my thought process is, like, say that you send something to me or say something to me, and I'm like, am I missing something? I always, my thought process, I go into myself first. I'm like, am I missing something? Did I do something? Did I not prepare? Like, what did I do first? If I'm like, I feel like I did everything. And I still don't blame the person, but then I'm like, that's when I open the door. I'm like, okay, can you walk me through what you thought? Because I think I'm good, and there's a disconnect between the two of us. I think I've kind of self-audited my decisions. Like, let me kind of think through your stuff, and I'm like, oh, that's it. Like, I didn't know that line of information, or, oh, crap, I didn't realize that. Like, I did something. I'm like, okay, good. But now we're on the same page, and usually it's not a confrontation thing. It's more of like, let me understand where we're coming from. Have you, because I'm sure you've been in situations that you've had hard conversations with people, right? Yeah. Okay.
There's a great book called Crucial Conversations. And I can't remember the author, but it's a book I used to use quite often. And I have a sister who works in counseling, and she works with imposter syndrome and all that type of stuff. And she's doing some stuff on hard conversations. So I sent her the book, and she's like, "This is unbelievable." But yeah, I mean, Crucial Conversations are big. Yeah, right there.
All the way over.
Yep. It's a really good book, and so yep. It's and so I sent her that book, and she loves it. So it looks. I'm pretty sure that's it. Looks like it. It's like it's been updated since my edition, but yeah. And but it just talks through. It gives you examples of things you can go through, anywhere from work life to home life to dealing with kids, spouses, whatever, and throws out examples and how to deal with conversations. And yeah, it's important to know how to navigate that.
So when you have say you have a difficult conversation, what's things do you process, or what's your pecking order of like how you're going to do it or have these conversations or prep or whatever?
Yeah, it depends on what it is, but the first is try to understand the situation. So if you're talking to somebody that you're having conflict with, per se, try to get the facts, right? Try to understand what it is from your perspective that is missing or not happening. Then when they come in, when you sit and talk with them, it's really more, to me, more listening to start, especially, and throw out here's why we're here, and I'd like to understand better your perspective on whatever the situation was, and let them go through it. I've been in many of those conversations, more than I want to be, where it's very difficult to get someone to step out of their own head, right? Where they're not listening, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's important that both sides listen. So I try to make sure people understand that people always tell my kids this. You never know what someone's going through in life, right? You always assume everything's good with them, and you don't know what else, other kind of noise is happening in their life. So you need to give people the benefit of the doubt and give them some space. I also think you need to make sure people understand failure is okay. So if you're talking with someone in a crucial situation, make them feel at ease. If you want them to really think introspectively and potentially come clean on something, make them understand that, it varies in times, but this is a fairly safe space. I'm talking to you because I care. I'm talking to you because I want to make sure we move forward in the right direction, and we have a long time to work with each other, right? So I think part of it is I try to make people feel comfortable, try to get to the root cause of what's causing the situation, make sure that they understand that if we can't get through to what's really happening, we're not going to get anywhere, right? So, we need to really understand what happened or what's happening so we can come up with a solution that we're both going to be happy with. And it might not be that I'm 100% happy, you're 100% happy, but we can live with the situation moving forward. So it's really trying to get them to understand that as the board would say, resistance is futile. If we don't engage equally, we're not going to have a long partnership.
Is this? And I'm assuming you're pretty direct on this.
I'm very direct.
Okay. Just like, because I feel like
I'm a direct person.
Yeah.
I'm a very easygoing, laid back, people will tell you, but when things get serious, I get very direct.
So when things have to be said, you say them, kind of.
Yes, I do.
Has that been? Because that's something too. I'm getting better at. I'll be honest. I'm like probably most people don't like confrontation, kind of, and I feel that I'm getting to the point now where I don't care as much. Not that I don't care.
I don't care.
I care, but it's the consequences of me not of inaction are worse than action.
Yeah.
So I feel like if I have to say it and it's gonna not turn out good or ruffle the wrong feathers or whatever, same thing. Like I've done my homework. I feel like I have to have that conversation. I have it. Let the cookie crumble wherever it goes, and then I'm fine with taking that step.
Once you take that step, it's easy, right?
It's a fear thing you get over.
Yeah. Once you take the step of being upfront and honest with somebody about that there's a problem.
Yep.
The whole relationship becomes so much easier. Now they might not accept it. I've done this with individuals where they come back the next day with a 2-page list of why they're right and I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That must be fun. Yeah.
That's always a good time.
Yeah.
And so you weren't listening. But most of the time, if you open up to somebody, you're honest and upfront and sincere about wanting them to be successful, and you're here, like I said, the way I manage is I'm here to help you. And so, what that might look like, it could be like, laying out an outline of what you should do. It could be calling you out when I think you're not doing something. I made an agreement with an employee that worked for me that every time she did something that I thought was off, within 10 minutes, we'd have a conversation because she was doing something quite frequently and she just didn't see it. So I said, okay, I'm going to point it out to you. Not in front of people. You and I are going to have a conversation right after, as soon as we can. And she has grown. She doesn't work for me anymore, but she works still in the industry, and she has grown and done great things. It's because she listened and wanted to learn and worked, and she wasn't seeing it, and she sees it.
Do you find that I would think a lot of it comes with like an ego aspect of it, where if someone says, if you told me, hey, Galen, I think you're screwing up on something, it's obviously going to be a punch to my ego, as I think anybody is, because nobody wants to be wrong, like most people, or, I think people want to maybe not let you down or do something just in general. Like that's how I'm made up of like, man, if I disappointed someone, especially if it's someone that I either look up to or maybe in a superior position, I would, it would sting, but then I would try to say like, okay, I'm going to work harder. And, I did it with sports. I do it with work. I try to look at that, but I'm a human. So it's like going to be a blow to me. But then I also feel like some people you say it to, and their ego is I'm going to, like you said, I'm going to bring the piece of paper. I'm going to tell you why you're wrong, where I feel like that's a lack of accountability, where like most things, even if someone said it to me, I'm like, I don't think they're right, but like let me take a minute or even a couple days to reflect on it, and like, am I doing something wrong, or how could that might be the case. And I try to self-reflect most days on stuff, just like and I think driving the car, shower, just like whatever. Do you find that there's a lot of like most of the issues are ego driven if they don't take?
Well, I guess ego's a huge thing. That's why I try to create a safe space with people. Now, if you got to the point where you've talked to this individual or you've interacted with them and many times and it's not going, I mean, there's no safe space at that point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but if you're early on stages and you're trying to help someone grow and learn, we all have blind spots, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we all have blind spots. If you don't think you have a blind spot to your kid and yourself, there are things that we have been exposed to, we have experienced. We've only seen it one way. Someone points that out, either something clicks in your head like, yeah, you're right. I never looked at it from that perspective, but some people never do that. They just like see it their own way. So part of it is understanding that you're not infallible. That, we all have blind spots and we can all learn. So I think if you approach people and try to make them understand that and how you do it, you can try to check the ego. And it's funny you mention ego, because one of my favorite sayings used to be when we get into big conversations or groups is check your ego at the door. Yeah. Because nothing's off the table here. It's a safe space. I want every idea thrown on the table. And if someone else owns something that you're saying, that person, check your ego, because it's not about you, right? We're trying to fix something. We're trying to move forward. We're trying to improve. Check your ego at the door. And I've used that term many times in my career, because egos get in the way. And egos make people make bad decisions. Yeah. I mean, really bad decisions. And you think about your career, divert a little different direction on you here, but if you think about your career, sometimes to get ahead, you have to do lateral moves. Yeah. Right. So you need to learn
or even step back.
Yeah, or step back. You need to learn foundational type stuff to be able to handle something higher. I mean, when someone tells you that I want you to go over and do this, I had this guy work for me that he was in production in the manufacturing, and I said, I want you to go over and handle the scheduling of the operation. And he was so convinced I was pushing him aside. And I'm like, no. I want you to understand that so you can do this job. And just trust me. I'm telling you, trust me. This will pay off. This guy's a vice president of Pfizer now. And he just, I got him more exposure to different things, and he enabled him to move up and build on his career. So ego sometimes can, ego and trust can get you in trouble.
So I guess a question for you, because I would say, I'm assuming based on President CEO that you're leading the ship kind of thing, and the leader. Do you have people that you talk to that, because one thing I find difficult is people, in our business, whether it's staff or agents who are independent contractors, sometimes they talk to me, oftentimes they don't, and I think it's just, like it's kind of like in sports, like you may not want to talk to the head coach, but you'll talk to a teammate or an assistant coach. Like, do you have, and then there's times where I find like I want to have conversations, but I need to have conversations with people that either can understand it or want to have those conversations. So then I oftentimes look at other brokers I might know around the country that I've just, come across paths with and I'm friends with, or different people locally in industries that I have conversations that are in certain similar, maybe, whatever. And do you have people like that you talk to? Do you have people that challenge your ego or challenge your thought process? Or do you find that, like, is that true? Like some days, do you have people within TDC that challenge you? Or is it sometimes where they're like, he's kind of the guy there and I don't really want to have that conversation with him. Maybe I'm intimidated to talk to him. And then, so you might have to get your stuff from other people.
Yeah. I mean, you asked me when we first started, do I miss working in my previous environment versus this one? Was it a big change, a lot of different? That is one of the huge changes. I had a lot more peers where I could sit and talk with and bounce ideas off of that, at the same level I'm at across the network and across the industry, because I knew people throughout the industry that I'd worked with over the years. So I had a lot more opportunity to do that and to talk to people much higher than me. Like I said, I used to travel with the current CEO of Pfizer. Before he was CEO, I traveled with him all the time. And I've traveled with, different high-level people. And so, listen to them and hear from them, their experiences, and bounce ideas off of them. There's not a lot of that in Plattsburgh, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
The experience of business people in Plattsburgh is not as broad as what I grew up in. So that is definitely something that I don't have what I had before. I still talk to colleagues and some of my old bosses in Pfizer every now and then. But it's usually not work related. It's more just talking. The people that work for me are not afraid to talk to me. I create an atmosphere where they understand that I'm here to help them, and I want them to ask questions, even if they think they're dumb questions. Mm-hmm. I want to try to help them learn. It's a fairly safe space. The board challenges me sometimes. So, in different things, I'll get in conversations with our board where it's more they don't understand why I might want to do something. And I try to explain to them, why, where I'm coming from, and why I think it's good for the organization and the community. And, most of the time they agree. Sometimes they don't, and that's okay.
Because you hear the term like it's lonely at the top, so that's what I was wondering.
Yeah,
if,
it is. I mean, when I first took over, was given the position of managing director of the Rouse Point site. That was back in 2006, I think, and from 1985 to 2006, I would go down and have lunch, basically at the same table, with pretty much the same people. Somebody came and went, right, for that period. And when I took over the role of site leader, basically, I remember going down and the whole conversation would stop.
Yeah.
It's like everyone would just stop talking. And it didn't take me long to figure out I can't eat lunch with these guys anymore.
Yeah.
And the people I've hung out with for decades and invented with and, and all that fun stuff, that I needed them to have a safe space to vent. Mm-hmm. And that was it. And if I showed up, they wouldn't do it. So I learned pretty quick that I can't do that anymore. And it can be lonely at the top. There's no doubt. It definitely changes how people see you and interact with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you get used to it.
Yeah. Like I said, it's just. I mean, these are just like questions of experience of like these are challenging things I find, and you're way more experienced than I am on a lot of this. Well, for the sake of time, I think I got through like a quarter of this list, David. Like there was a lot of like you put on stuff. I'm like, oh my god, these are really good. We didn't even talk about golf, but that's all right. Maybe next time if I bug you again to come on. I do want to ask you one more question very quickly. To be a quick little wrap up. You already told me who you wanted to have lunch or dinner with, so it was Lincoln. Sure. But 3 books, if you had to recommend 3 books for the audience, knowing that it's a generalized audience of people, what would it be? If you had to pick 3 books that you think are worth recommending.
Well, Crucial Conversations, Leading Change is another book. I guess I can't remember the author's name, but it's a really good book. I've got Post-its and sticky notes all over it.
John Cotter?
Yep. Where are you?
Right here?
Yep. It's a great book. Very good book. I'd recommend it to anybody. I use that book as a Bible as I've helped lead sites all around the world through, closures and people changing their lives. It's a really good book.
But is it by this author? There's a couple of them, but it's definitely by this author?
Yep.
There you go. Add it to my wish list.
Yeah. A third book. I don't know if I can come up with a third book for you. I'm just going to stick with those two. Those are my two favorite books for business-wise.
And how many times have you read through them?
All the Lean Change I've read through.
Just flip through them and...
I use it. I used to use it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a reference.
Yeah.
Yep.
So are you, when you... I lied. I'll give you one more question. When you read books, do you mark up your books?
Yes.
Okay. Do you write in them and stuff?
I write, post notes, everything.
Bend pages?
Yep. If you saw that book, it's not my office. It's in my home office. I mean, it's loaded with stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the same. I use books as like textbooks. I reference guides.
Yep. I gave my whole leadership team at all the sites that book. When each site went into closure, I gave the teams those and said, read this. We'll talk about it. So
look at that. You get a paperback for $552.
$552.
They must not make them anymore. You get a used hardcover for $278. So it's wild. Like some of them, because they're out of production.
That's crazy.
When people ask like, what do you have a lot of? I always say I have a lot of notes and a lot of books.
I think I have 2 of those in my house.
Paperbacks.
Yeah.
Flip it, man. Just buy the hardcover, take all your notes in there, and transcribe.
One's pristine. Probably never touched it.
Oh, God, 700 at least. Yeah. All right. Well, David, I appreciate you coming on. This was a lot of fun. And your first podcast, so you knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, first podcast. I guess I got to start listening to podcasts.
It's kind of like public speaking, right? You know what you're talking about, so it's easy. If anybody wants to find you, TDC, what's the best way for them to look you guys up? Website?
The website and or call our office. We're on the website. You can email us, call us. We're there for business, and our goal is to create jobs. So if you're looking to locate in Plattsburgh, New York, give us a call.
Love it. All right. We're going to end there. Episode 247, The Galen Trombley Show. We're out. Thank you for listening to The Galen Trombley Show. Be sure to subscribe, review, and share the episode. You can follow me on all social platforms at Galen Trombley. Thanks for listening.